Good evening and welcome to tonight's very important town hall meeting on the topic of ending child abuse and neglect here in Jacksonville and Onslow County. My name is Elliot Potter, and for many years most of you know that I help report on child abuse while working at the Daily News. I can tell you this has been a long and challenging fight here. These days I serve as a consultant with one of the groups that's represented here tonight, and its Child Advocacy Center to help bring attention to this ongoing battle. Tonight, through the efforts of TASCO, a community task force that brings government agencies, nonprofit groups, and other child advocates together to combat child abuse and neglect, we are here to shine a spotlight on the problems. We also hope to enlist, and this is a very important part of what we're here for tonight, we also hope to enlist all residents, everyone, parents and non-parents, to help in this fight to protect the precious future of our county and our communities. We're in a real battle. There's been an increase in crimes against children in our community since the rise of COVID in 2020. Please consider these statistics from the Onslow County Sheriff's Office regarding crimes against children, and that includes neglect, abuse, and sexual assault. In 2020, we had 130 total cases with the Sheriff's Office. In 2021, which was right in the middle of things, and some of the reporting agencies were inactive, like the schools, for example, had cut back. But in 2021, we had 163 cases, and by 2022, the number had risen to 170. And since the spread of COVID in 2020, child abuse cases also have been on the rise in the city of Jacksonville. In the city, there have been 5 child deaths linked to abuse and neglect in the past 3 years, including 4 deaths of children under the age of 1. The number of abuse and neglect cases in the city has been alarming. 50 abuse cases in 2020, down to 2025, again, when the schools were not operating fully and some of the reporting mechanisms were not fully functional. But so that number dropped in 2020 to 25 in 2021, but it was back up again to 43 in 2022. Neglect cases have risen from 33 in 2020 to 51 in 2022. And Chief Mike Yanero from the police department here in Jacksonville, we were talking today thinking that some of the numbers that existed in 20 and 21 and maybe in 22 we may not know about until later in later years. So that's a number that could grow. As I said earlier, TASCO has brought together the local forces that are battling this problem, many of them represented at this table. Tonight we have the coordinator of TASCO to help us bring us up to date on the efforts now and going forward. In addition to heading up TASCO, Tondrea Leach also serves as the executive director of Peers. And now I'm going to turn the program over to her, and she's going to tell us all about what's been going on before we move into our full panel discussion.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I greatly appreciate it. I do have a little small slideshow for you guys just to help bring awareness to what TASCO is about and why we were formed. We actually were formed with Chief Yanero by lead, went to City Council and said, we have a problem with the rise of child abuse and neglect in Onslow County. And so in 2018, he helped to form a group with One Place and Partnership for Children of North Carolina to come to the table to figure out what is going on in Onslow County and what can we do about it. What kind of systems can we create to assist in decreasing or eliminating child abuse and neglect in Onslow County? Also, we needed to understand what are the prevention services, what are the intervention services in Onslow County, and are we getting that out there to our community, helping our community to understand what type of supports are here in Onslow County. When we had Prevent Child Abuse of North Carolina coming to the table when we were first formed, and we had nonprofits across the county coming together, city employees, county employees coming together, we were just forming. We didn't have a mission statement, a vision statement, or a purpose, and they helped us define what is the mission for TASCO, which is turning adversity into success for children in Onslow. So our mission is to eliminate child abuse and neglect through community education, awareness, intervention, and advocacy. Our vision in Onslow County is children to grow up in a healthy and safe, stable, and nurturing environment. That's across the board, regardless of what environment our children are in. The purpose is to build safe and stable nurturing relationships and environments for children in the Jacksonville and Onslow County communities in order to prevent abuse and neglect, regardless if you're military or civilian. We're here for everyone in Onslow County. We are a true collaborative approach. We have people from 35 different agencies as a part of TASCO. We come together once a month, we meet, we talk, and we try to formulate plans. How are we going to do the work that needs to be done in Onslow County? We do have over 40 members of TASCO, and that also includes parents. And if you're asking, yes, we need some faith-based community members. Yes, we need some medical personnel to be at the table. So please contact me. We were also able to design a logo. So you will start seeing us out in the community with our own table so that during community events, we will be talking to everyone about what we can do to partner with you. We also, with the North Carolina Prevent Child Abuse, we also developed what's called a CPAP, a Community Prevention Action Plan. And a part of this is, it's 4 steps. We made it really simple in Onslow County. However, these 4 steps are going to take everyone in Onslow County to help bring to realization of preventing and eliminating child abuse and neglect here. Our main goals are to educate parents, teachers, caregivers, and professionals to gain an understanding of the ACEs. If you've never heard of ACEs, that is Adverse Childhood Experience, and we will be talking more about that as panel members. Helping children identify feelings and manage emotions. Some of you know, as children, we may not have been told it was okay about emotions. So it is okay to talk about emotions and our feelings. Create safe and physical and emotional environments at home, school, and in all of our neighborhoods. And the child maltreatment prevention by building capacity of parents and prevention partners and getting that information out there to our community members. Thank you, Elliot.
All right, well thank you, Tondrea. And she'll be back later tonight to close us out. Now, this is really, this meeting tonight, this town hall, is about the folks, you folks that are in the audience. It's about the folks that are looking in on G10. We want, and the people that are up here on this panel and many of the people that are in the audience, you know, they work this issue every day. And I watch them do it, and they're dedicated to it. But to get this problem solved, I think everybody up here would echo this, and that is it's going to take, I believe TASCO's, one of TASCO's mottos is that we are your village. And it will take a village. It will take the entire community to get this done. So that's why we're here, and that's why we have a bit of a sense of urgency to make this happen. So those in attendance, if you have questions as we go along tonight, you can step up to the microphone. I'll find a break and call on you, and you can ask your question. And those that are watching live on G10, you can go to the Facebook, and you can go to TASCO has a page there. Submit your questions right there, and we have a gentleman over here who is monitoring that, and we'll try to get some of those on the air as well, and if you have something that you would like to pose to any of our panelists. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the panel discussion. We have collected questions, and our first segment is actually going to focus on some of the, I run into a lot of these folks and have interviewed them with what we do over at one place about the dedicated law enforcement folks who are on the front line of this battle. And without them, this whole thing could hardly get started. So So we have with us tonight, we have a Julia Parrish. She's a detective with the Special Victims Unit of the Jacksonville Police Department. She's in, what is that color? I know it's a color. I would say pink, but I'm sure it's not. Okay. And we have Linwood Foy. He's a major with the Onslow County Sheriff's Office. And Major Foy, I'd like to pose the first question to you, and Detective Parrish, if you'd like to jump in on this, feel free to. But Major Foy, what are the special challenges that face law enforcement in dealing with child abuse and neglect?
Well, first off, thank you for having us tonight. It's a very important topic to discuss, and it definitely does take a team to work these type of cases. Some challenges that we face is this isn't a crime that typically happens out in the open, like a lot of special victims type cases. It's secretive, and people tend to try to keep it secret and keep it within the family or a select group of individuals that know about it. So the secrecy around it, that prevents a challenge immediately for law enforcement. So gaining the trust of people that do have the information to come forward and speak with us, that's the major challenge right out of the gate when it comes to investigating these cases. But to successfully do it, it takes a team effort, and I think that the partners that we have in the room tonight work really well together. The numbers that you called out earlier, those are probably shocking to a lot of people in the room. But we work well together to try to get successful prosecutions. But yeah, the secrecy around the crime itself is a major challenge.
I mean, that kind of cooperation with the district attorney's office, for example, I'm sure becomes critical.
Absolutely.
And I know they have a special prosecutor over there that works on some of these cases.
Yes, sir, they do.
We have a lot of folks that are represented on the panel here that represent different aspects of this battle. And it's amazing. There are several ways that they all come together, just like they are here tonight, in working together, because these cases they go step by step, and they take time, and they take diligence. Detective Parrish, what are some of the trends that you've seen in investigating this kind of cases?
Our population, of course, North Carolina, Jacksonville in particular, with the military bases and stuff, we have a whole lot of young population. We have the younger, 18 to 25-ish. They're young themselves, they're having children, and a lot of times the hurdle that we're trying to get past is the fact that this is a very young population, first time away from their parents and their family members, and then they come here and then they don't have the local support system here. Sometimes their families can live on the other coast or several states away. So we have that hurdle to deal with, and on top of that, we're dealing with they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with working and just working, trying to put kids through school, marriage, have a social life, everything, just trying to balance everything that we, try to juggle every single day of our life. So we have that issue too. The fact that sometimes parents may not be on the same page when it comes to disciplining their children and how they want to raise their children and stuff like that. So we have that issue too. Parents' roles with their children, who's going to do what. We have a lot of conflict when it comes to that sort of thing. Mom wants dad to do this, dad wants mom to do that, and then we have some conflict there. We also deal with a lot of blended families, step parents, step siblings, and people trying to co-parent as a whole. We have those type of hurdles that we see in a lot of our cases. And unfortunately, we see a lot of inattentive parents. They're too busy on social media, they're too busy on video games and that sort of thing, and they're, kids kind of left to fend for themselves sometimes, and we need to, that's one of our biggest hurdles, is trying to stop that. We need parents that come from work and they're plugged in with their children, and they're not plugged into social media and video games all night. We want them, focusing on their children. And the typical house stuff, money issues, domestic issues, and things like that. So it's a huge uphill battle, but of course that's that's why we're here. We're trying to shed some light on all these issues, and kind of, if you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to speak up if you see someone struggling. You know, that's a big hurdle for us, is having people to step up and say, hey, you know, do you need some help? Do you need someone to watch your kid for a couple hours? Do you need this? You need that? Kind of, we want all of us together, TASCO members and all of us as a whole, kind of take care of ourselves and each other. You know, we want you to do that with your neighbors too. If you see something, say something about it, or help that mom that you see is struggling.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned, and I'd like to pose this to both you and Major Foy. You mentioned social media, and of course there have been other changes in society, but I would say that's been the main one that's affected just about everything we do.
Yes.
But it certainly presents a serious issue regarding protecting children, because sometimes this is used as a tool for not good in the hands of certain people. So, I mean, has that been, do you have people that focus in on that?
Absolutely. Do you want to speak on that, or do you want me to? As you talking about as far as?
I mean, where does that come into play? How does monitoring that, how does dealing with social media issues come into play in terms of your investigations, and of course for others trying to protect children?
Yes, well, we deal with it a lot as far as people trying to solicit children and stuff like that online, and we constantly do education pieces for parents as far as what to see, monitor your child's phones, you know, make sure you have their passwords and all of that kind of stuff. So we do monitor a lot when it comes to adults trying to solicit children online.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you know, it's a complex issue with, you know, socioeconomics play a part in it. Young parents, the adverse childhood experiences that were mentioned earlier plays a part in, you know, sometimes how people parent their children. But, you know, given the stress that came along with COVID and the lockdowns and everything, that the stress that put on families, you know, parents out of work, children at home, and then inflation, you know, spending more at the grocery store, all of those stressors just contribute to, it's like a powder keg, it contributes. So, you know, some people get on social media and sort of, you know, forget about their problems in the world, you know, for a while. And, you know, that's an issue when it comes to the neglecting children sometimes. But just the powder keg of stress, I think, over the last few years has definitely contributed to the increase in the child abuse.
I want to remind folks that you're welcome to join me in asking questions to our panelists here, and those people at home, you received instructions for that as well, so we would be glad to have some others join in. I'd like to know, maybe from both of you, but Major Foy, you can start with this one. When does a case become a matter for criminal justice system, and instead of maybe turning the case over to social services?
Yes, sir. So a lot of times we sometimes, well, not a lot of times, we do sometimes see what I talked about earlier. Some people, how their parents raised them so far as discipline, that's how they raise their children. Everybody doesn't spank their children. Everybody doesn't use corporal punishment. So if corporal punishment's taken, you know, too far, and maybe you leave a bruise on a child, that doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a criminal offense. However, we work that case with the Department of Social Services up until the point where it's, you know, it's deemed not a criminal matter. Law enforcement agencies aren't built to provide, you know, follow-up services and parenting classes and things of that nature. So our partners there with Department of Social Services sort of pick up that piece and you know, provide services to the family when it's not a criminal case.
Did you have something you want to add with that?
I sure can. Law enforcement and DSS in Onslow County work so well together. We Ms. Thigpen, you're shaking your head, you know.
Absolutely.
We are constantly on the phone with each other about our cases. And I always say, we work side by side, us and law enforcement and DSS and all of our other agencies. We work side by side with each other, and we share information back and forth. But we all know our role in the investigation, and where DSS can come in and put the services in place and provide resources and that sort of thing, we're on board to see if it rises to the level of child abuse, you know, for charging purposes and things like that. And once, if we get to the point where it doesn't rise to that level, we kind of back off and we kind of let, you know, DSS and them continue their route with everything. But at any given moment, we can jump right back on board if they, you know, continue their work with the family and stuff and realize that something's not right, law enforcement needs to jump back on board. We're a phone call, a text away, and we're right back on board working with them. So we have an excellent relationship with all of our community partners here in Onslow County.
And we have Susan Thigpen with us, and she's going to speak next. But she's from the Department of Social Services, so she'll be able to give us her perspective on that as well. Again, I would invite folks to ask questions if you have something that regards this. Let me address this to you, Detective Parrish. How do you engage the community now as investigators and law enforcement officers in preventing these kind of cases?
We, before this started tonight, Captain. Yes. Captain Floyd and I talked about this, and it's one of those things where we were talking about people have a fear of reporting, and they have a fear of saying something because it may not turn out right, and they're embarrassed or whatever. So we were talking about that fear,
Yeah,
the fear of...
They can be anonymous, or can they be anonymous?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that was the fear of law enforcement getting involved, or the fear of not trusting DSS or not trusting law enforcement and stuff. So when we work these cases, from our very first conversation with the parents, we have to kind of let them know that it's not an us against them situation. It is us working together. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if anybody's charged or not. We still have it's not a us against you, it's us working this together. And it's an uphill battle sometimes because people just have the fear of the unknown of working with us or working with DSS and stuff. So that's a huge hurdle that we have to overcome with some of these cases.
Roger.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's, you know, years ago I was a school resource officer, and it's probably some of the best times of my whole law enforcement career. Because you truly do get to make an impact on young kids and show them, if you're a good SRO, you show them a side of law enforcement that they're not going to see on television most of the time. And you build that trust in the communication. But getting the SROs to see something, say something, you know, people don't like DSS in their lives. They don't like law enforcement in their lives because they perceive that as a very negative thing. Although there's some things that law enforcement working with DSS can provide families that are truly going to help them in the long run. But there's that negativity that's attached to it. So I think breaking that barrier through communication and education is gonna help us there.
You know, a lot of people, and this can be a touchy subject, but a lot of people do not realize that not only do they have a moral and a human obligation to report child abuse if they know about it or see it, but they also have a legal obligation as well, don't they?
Absolutely.
And, you know, so, you know, hopefully it doesn't come down to somebody feeling like that's the only reason they would do it, but if that's the only reason you will do it, then that's reason enough. But, you know, and Detective Parrish, I'm going to steal some of your notes if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Because we're coming to the end of this segment. But she said there are several ways to report, and you can do it anonymously. You can do it by calling the police department or the sheriff's office and asking to speak with an officer. You can stop by the police department or the sheriff's office and do the same thing, ask to speak to somebody. You can call DSS, and if DSS needs to get the police involved or the law enforcement involved, they will make a referral. And you can also even call Crime Stoppers. which has a number that is well publicized, and they will do and take what action is necessary. So, you know, it is going to take a lot of folks busy to do what needs to be done and putting a stop to a lot of some of the things that are going on. So we certainly appreciate the job that you and law enforcement do. And thank y'all for being here. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
We're going to move on to Susan Thigpen. She is the Deputy Director, Onslow County Department of Social Services. Susan, would you briefly describe, I guess, the role that your agency has? I know it's broad. I know there's a lot to go over. And we're just going to cover the surface of some of this because we're going to have more town hall meetings. But tell us a little bit about what DSS does.
First of all, I do want to thank everyone for coming out. And the largest responsibility that social services has with Child Protective Services is protecting children from abuse and neglect and doing everything possible to ensure that children grow up in a safe and healthy environment. We assess children whenever there are allegations of abuse or neglect by their parents or caretakers. So you heard about many of the cases that we're involved in with law enforcement, but the majority of the situations that we do assess don't involve abuse. They are cases of neglect. In the last fiscal year, we had 3,091 reports of abuse and neglect involving 1,854 families. And so while that seems like a high number, I think the important thing to realize is that for most of those families that we are involved with, we are able to get involved, assess whether there is abuse or neglect occurring, and if there are services that are needed to stabilize that family, we can put those services in place. We can assist the family with whatever needs they may have, whether it's connecting them with services through social services, such as food stamps or child support, or it may be our community partners. With the high numbers in the reports that I gave you, there actually were only about 430 families last year that were involved in in-home services. And what that means is we determined that there was abuse or neglect occurring in the family, and we worked with that family in order to reduce risk for the child, to build the protective factors that are there with that family, so that children can grow up with their families in a safe environment and can be happy.
Is there anything, we talked a little bit about making a report. Is there anything that you want to add about reporting to DSS about abuse or neglect? And maybe when a person should call law enforcement or when they should call DSS, or would you ever recommend that they call both?
They absolutely could contact both, but I think it's important to realize if you contact either social services or law enforcement, even if it's a situation that social services would not investigate, we will refer that to law enforcement. However, you can make a report to social services. We are available 24/7. We have staff that are available during our regular work hours, so you can contact us at our number, and I think Tondrea will have that for you at the end of today's meeting. And after hours, we also have on-call services that are available, and so you can reach out to that number at any point to make a report. That report, as Julia mentioned, can be anonymous. I think the other important thing to remember is that you don't have to be able to prove abuse has occurred or neglect. You don't have to have evidence that something has happened. All you simply need to have is reason to suspect that abuse or neglect may be occurring. And from the information that you provide us at the time of an intake, we would determine whether it meets the guidelines for abuse and neglect and whether we would assess that situation.
And what type of information might that be?
That information, obviously, the more information you can provide us, the better. And those things would be the names of family members. A lot of times we will need to know, or would like to know, what school the children attend, the address for the families. Because the more information you can give us, the better we can determine whether we need to be involved and whether we would need to also get law enforcement involved. As Julia said, we do partner very closely. And so in situations that involve both law enforcement and social services, we work diligently to make sure that we assess those situations in as safe and comfortable environment for those children and families as possible, so that we're not re-traumatizing them by multiple interviews. Again, you can make it anonymously, and sometimes the information that may be given is as simple as a license tag number. And we do everything possible. If there is reason to suspect abuse and neglect, we're going to try to identify who that individual is and determine from there if we need to investigate.
So nobody would have to worry about, for example, somebody from DSS telling the family who made the report. That's not going to happen.
No, that
Yeah.
does not happen. We do have situations sometimes where families suspect who made the report, and so they may tell their family members that social services told them that they made the report, but I think it is very important to remember that is something that we hold in the strictest of confidences. So anytime you are making a report, that information is never shared with the family.
What kind of success do you have in reuniting families that have been hit with one of these issues of abuse and neglect?
I think the biggest success and thing to consider is that out of all the families that we do assess, there's only a small number of children that ever come into agency custody. So I think our greatest success is that we are able to work with families and keep children in their homes with their parents by providing the services and resources that are needed to keep these children safe. Even when the children do come into custody, and last year we had 210 children that were in custody during that year. 70 of those during that time frame exited care, with 61 of those exiting to either reunification with their parents or to some other relatives or caretakers. From the moment that children enter agency custody, we are tasked with doing everything possible to allow these children to go back home. We recognize the importance of family, and we want parents to be able to provide for children and nurture their children. And so that's what we work with, and I think our success rate is high.
And people that might hesitate to report because they think they're going to break up a family should not worry so much about that, because it could happen. It could happen. Maybe it needs to happen. But there are, most of the time, or a lot of the time, your point would be to try to find some sort of reconciliation and solve the problem, protect the children. That has to be
Absolutely.
number one, right?
Protecting children is first.
Yeah.
But we look at every other option prior to looking at removal. Whether it is putting safety plans in place, such as parents won't use any physical discipline during the time that we're assessing, or it may be something that is more rigid, such as identifying a temporary safety placement, which is some relative or friend that would be willing to keep the children for a few days until we can get those services in place. Again, the only time that children are ever removed from their home is when there is no other way possible to keep these children safe. And in that situation, removal is the best option for those children until we can reduce risk and they can return home safely.
Well, thanks. You guys have a big job. And we appreciate you taking the time to be on this panel. And we hope to hear from you again in some of the other town halls that we hope are forthcoming. Now we're going to turn to someone who I deal with or work with. And I can tell you that I have learned more from this person about protecting children than I could ever imagine. When you're a journalist going into a position, you think you know everything, and then you find out you really don't know anything. And I'm talking about Kathleen Holbrook, who's the Vice President of Advocacy for One Place. Kathleen, can you tell us a little bit about what One Place's role is as it relates to child abuse and neglect?
Certainly, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. This is a very important topic and dear to my heart. One Place is an agency that strengthens children and connects families to resources and works very diligently at ending child abuse. Specifically, the Child Advocacy Center responds to requests from law enforcement and child protective services when there are allegations of sexual abuse. So you heard Susan and the detectives speaking tonight about the cases of sexual abuse and physical abuse that occur in Onslow County. So when they need those children evaluated, they contact the Child Advocacy Center. And we are a neutral, child-friendly location with professionals who will do an evaluation. We provide specialized child forensic interviews, comprehensive medical exams, advocacy, links to community resources, and mental health. So it is that one-stop shop approach. We all work together. We've had a multidisciplinary team in place since 2007, and we come together on a monthly basis to talk about these cases. More than 25 agencies are represented on the multidisciplinary team, and we can all call one another at any time to talk about services to children or barriers that may exist.
Well, you mentioned multidisciplinary things, so let's stay on that topic.
Sure.
And explain what that is, and a little bit about how you differ from, say, TASCO, what the job at TASCO, because a lot of the same people are coming to the table, but there are dramatic differences in what the actual mission is for those two groups.
Every agency sitting at this table is on our multidisciplinary team, as well as a number of people in the audience tonight. So specifically, in order to have a child advocacy center, you must have a multidisciplinary team in place. And that includes disciplines, specifically law enforcement, child protective services, advocates, medical, mental health, prosecution. And all of those services are coordinated by the Child Advocacy Center, which is a community agency. So all of those disciplines respond together. They come on site when a child is evaluated, and it's for the purpose of working collaboratively to reduce the amount of time or burden on one particular agency, because we put all of our heads together to try and serve these children and to prevent children and families from having to repeatedly talk about their story or traveling from agency to agency. So all of the agencies on our multidisciplinary team are also represented on TASCO, just on a larger scope.
One thing that is noteworthy here is that with the Child Advocacy Center, you deal with every law enforcement agency in the county.
We do.
That includes the military as well.
It does.
And you also provide interview services, the medical exams.
Yes.
All of those cover the entire county, correct?
Yes, we serve all of Onslow County and Camp Lejeune, and we work with local law enforcement, State Bureau of Investigation, as well as the FBI. So all of the law enforcement agencies that would be represented. And NCIS is a very important partner, as well as CID aboard the base.
Do you feel like in Onslow County we have adequate resources to help or treat children who have been abused?
We have a number of tremendous resources, but we are lacking specific resources, mental health for children and families. There is such a tremendous need for mental health services that our agencies in the community just can't keep up. And so for the mental health providers that are available, they have very long waiting lists. For children who have been victims of abuse, there are very specific evidence-based treatments that are effective. We simply do not have enough mental health providers who have been trained in those evidence-based treatments. We are also lacking pediatric specialties. In spite of the very high rate of children in Onslow County, we have the most children birth through 5 than any other North Carolina county, and a very large population of children under the age of 18. We lack pediatric specialties in our community, such as a pediatric radiologist, a pediatric ophthalmologist, a pediatric oncologist. Children under the age of 3 who have been physically abused are required to travel to Greenville to a tertiary care center to get a complete workup, because those children are nonverbal and they can't tell you what has happened to them when they've been physically abused. So it requires the pediatric specialist to look at them from head to toe, inside and out. And then funding, if I can say one more thing. We need a whole lot more funding for services, because we have a very high rate of child abuse and neglect in Onslow County, and we want to be able to adequately fund it. Prevention is absolutely essential. Unfortunately, there's very little funding for prevention.
And mental health services after the fact were almost, largely ignored until recently, until not too long ago.
Yes,
that we were able to set up something that addresses that issue specifically.
Yes, there's a lot of research that has gone into very effective evidence-based treatments for children, time limited, to help those kids to reclaim their healthy childhoods and put this behind them, because we don't want an episode of abuse to define those children for the rest of their lives. We want them to be happy and healthy.
Have you seen an increase in cases since COVID?
Absolutely. Yes.
Tell us a little bit. What do you think some of the reasons for that might be?
Well, most children are abused by their family members, and they reside in the same homes with them. So when the world closed down during the period of COVID, children were no longer in school, parents were no longer going to work, then children were at home with their offenders. And unfortunately, the cases of abuse escalated with them. And that has continued. This past year, we saw 35 children more than the year before, which is really significant for us. It was an increase of more than 10%.
That could be, as the Chief Unero had mentioned earlier in our conversation, could be something that plays itself out over time, and everybody could be, that's up here could be dealing with that.
Yes.
So it's obviously a very complicated topic. I would have to say, I know that people seem a little shy about raising questions, but if anybody has any ideas about things that might help, about situations that they would have a question about, I think anybody on this panel would love to answer that question. And we do have somebody who wants to pose a question. Would you tell us who you are, or you don't have to?
Oh, that's fine.
Anonymous. We can do anonymous.
My name is Joanna Darnell, and I'm just a member of the community. We heard a lot about ACEs and the COVID and the socioeconomic reporting, which is so important, and the services after the fact, but just touching on, I think, a lot of times we approach problems in general, the knee-jerk reaction, but I feel like we have these families that have their own adverse childhood experiences that are now raising these children. And so, Detective Parrish, you mentioned help, asking for help before. And so what kind of respite do we have in place? We already know we have, after the fact, not enough mental health funding or services or providers. What do we have in the community before any of this even happens to help take the stress off families? We're talking about childcare and just general assistance, educational opportunities. People don't know how to parent. They've never seen a different way. So what do we have for that? And or if we don't have much, what are we doing to address that? And what kind of things is the task force looking at to bring that to the community on a level before it happens?
Detective Parrish, and I would open up the floor to anyone who would
Absolutely.
have information about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with this one. And then I'm gonna pass it over to Tondrea. Like I said, there's a lot of fear with new parents. They're afraid that we're gonna come in and take their kid away if they have if they call and ask for help. They're overwhelmed, moms and dads, and like stay-at-home moms with small children. They're afraid, they don't know that they can have they're allowed to put their child in childcare and just spend the day at home or spend the day, for self-care and stuff like that. They don't know that those services are available, and that's where I'll kick it down to Tondrea in just a minute. As far as peers and stuff goes, they offer the child care and stuff like that where a parent can drop in a child and just have a couple hours to themselves, and there's people there that will take care of your child during that time. And then, like you said, these are young people that don't have the skills to parent. Maybe they didn't have the parents that were home with them and taught them certain ways of how to conflict resolution and just walking away and taking a breath whenever you're getting frustrated and stuff like that. So we have a lot of that. So ultimately, it's community buy-in. We need you guys to be eyes and ears along with us. And, the resources that you guys are getting provided tonight, pass that information along, because even if you don't have small children yourself, your neighbors do and your friends do. So where you're learning tonight, all these resources are available. We just gotta, reach out and call peers or call wherever and, just ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, or don't be afraid to ask your neighbor if there's anything you can do. If you see that mom who has the husband deployed or something, or, dad that's overwhelmed and things like that. So it's ultimately community buy-in. We just need to be the eyes and ears for each other, and just, if you see something, say something. I know we've said that several times here tonight. It's community buy-in, and it's just looking out for each other and knowing there are resources out there. We just have to, we have to do better as far as getting that, information into the hands of our community.
So I will say connections matter when it comes to resources. I do have some brochures over to my left if anybody wants to see all of our agencies. We did do an environmental scan, so we can put that on our website. It has every agency that is a part of TASCO and what services they provide. It has phone numbers, it has emails, so that anyone can access those individually. They can walk into peers. We have people walking into peers. We've never closed down through COVID. We have parenting classes. Everything we offer is free to the community. Parenting classes, our drop-in childcare program, our adolescent parenting program, and we even have an outreach. But then you have the Women's Center that also offers services. You have one place that's offering services. You have the Department of Social Services and the Health Department that's offering services. There are so many services that we can connect families to. It's just having the family come to one of us and say, I need help. Can you help me get connected to this? And we will find the resources. If one of our agencies doesn't offer the services, that we're not going to turn that person away. We're going to talk to that person. We're going to get to know them. We're going to get to know what services they need. How can we help them by connecting them to those other community partners? We are their family away from their family. We are their village. So anybody on TASCO is willing to do that. And there are so many free services, on base, off base. We can connect them to those services. I just couldn't tell you all the services because we do have wonderful services. They're just not widely known. That's why we're hoping with future town halls that we'll be able to bring in other partners so that you can learn about more of the community resources that we have available here.
Tondrea, I think a future town hall may be on the issue of protection, right?
Yes,
That's something that
it will be. Yes,
we will
sir.
talk about. And I think that's an excellent question. And I think it is because I know a lot of these, we talk about the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, but the people that are in this, we also talk about the protective factors, the 5 protective factors. What is necessary to protect the children? And a lot of times, you know, you can provide direct protection for children. You can help develop children. But the person that you have to work with is the parent. And so the protective factors and the important topic here would be how can we help the parents? And you were exactly right, to take some of those pressures off them and to maybe lead them in the areas and lead them to learn things about parenting that they do not know.
Can I say something, Elliot? Also, I do want you guys to know, I've worked many years in child protective services. I never met a parent that didn't love their children. I don't want anybody to think that anyone is up here saying, just because we have child abuse and neglect in our community, parents don't love their kids. They do love their kids. It was just because of the way they've been brought up, the way they're raising their children. We just need to help them. We need to partner with them. And that's what we're here to do.
All right, thanks. I tell you, also leads into our next topic, which we have with us also Kristen Richmond-Hoover. She is the Public Health Director at Onslow County Health Department. She's served in some other counties nearby, so you know about these problems in eastern North Carolina. What is your agency's role, Health Department? It doesn't exactly seem like, I mean, obviously with DSS and some of the other groups, but tell us about what you do and what your agency does in prevention and response to child abuse and neglect.
Certainly. Thank you, Elliot, and thank the community for being here and for, highlighting this topic. At the Health Department, we exist to preserve and protect the public's health. And part of what we do in the Health Department is to assess our community and to see where the gaps are and, what are the needs in our community. Certainly, we've already heard tonight that about a quarter of our population is made up of individuals under the age of 18. And then we've also talked about how we're the youngest community in the state and that we have this gigantic group of very young parents. We also know that Onslow County struggles when it comes to social associations, and that can make it more difficult to be a young parent and not have a tribe that you exist with that helps you out and that just does life with you. So specifically, some of the things that the Health Department does is recognize those things, try to assist with mobilizing community partnerships, but we also provide direct services to our community. We perform well child exams, well child checks, and as a healthcare provider, it's very important that those people who are doing these well child exams or any type of exam with children are sensitive to adverse childhood experiences and are aware of the risk factors that those adverse childhood experiences can contribute to the rest of their life. We also have home visitation for newborns. That's an opportunity for us to check in on new moms and brand new babies and make sure that they're feeling like they're supported and connected and that they have what they need, that they have a good plan for how to care for themselves and also for their child. We also have care management for at-risk children. One of the things that that program specifically has focused on are infants that might be born to mothers that have substance use issues and making sure that those issues are being addressed appropriately and working with social services to look at the solutions for that. I hope that gives a little bit of an overview of what we do.
And we talked about adverse childhood experiences. Tell it, because that term may seem foreign to some people, but it really isn't. We really know about it. We just don't know the name for it, right?
Right. So, we've talked tonight specifically about child abuse and neglect and very specific forms of ACEs or adverse childhood experiences that we'll call them ACEs as we move forward. But these can just be exposures that exist in a child's life that are potentially traumatic. So having those exposures where they themselves were the victim of abuse, it could be sexual, physical, emotional abuse in their household. It can also be other things, exposure to violence in their household, growing up in a family where there is a parent with a severe mental health condition, or substance use concerns in the home, having a parent that has severe depression or ends up a victim of suicide or an attempt of suicide. being in a home where a parent was incarcerated for some portion of that child's life are all examples of adverse childhood experiences. And we know that these adverse childhood experiences are cumulative in nature and can impact them over the course of their lifetime. It really results in toxic stress to them, and you can kind of think about it as a, your body's response to just being, amped up all the time. It's like a car being revved up for days on end. And, you wouldn't expect a car that's being revved up continuously like that to last very long. And we see the same thing in our human bodies. When we have that constant exposure to toxic stress, it plays itself out in chronic diseases, in increased mental health issues later into adulthood, increased risk for risky behaviors, whether it be, abuse of alcohol or drugs, depressive episodes, other things like that. But certainly it is a stress on the cardiovascular system. So we certainly see a lot of heart disease that comes from these types of exposures, and they do stack up in a lifetime. So it's really important that we deal with a lot of these exposures that can happen, that we recognize it, that we make referrals to appropriate management, and that individuals, seek care.
One of the things I want to mention here is that we have a group in Onslow County, a Rotary Club chapter that was formed in Onslow County, it's about ending child abuse. One of the first things that club did, I happen to be in it, but it's a great club. But one of the first things we did was read a book, and it was about what happened to you. It's Oprah Winfrey, and I'm sure a lot of you, if not all of you, have read it. And talking with some medical experts and talking about the very thing that you mentioned. It's the fact that, we may think these problems are just, they go away, they don't.
They don't.
And they last till you die.
Yeah.
Till you're 60 and 70 years old, they may not show up. But it's interesting. It is an interesting topic, and one that I think needs a little more attention so that people understand the seriousness of the situation that we face with this. But I'm glad that, and you mentioned about the fact that, you have health and life outcomes that depend on what's going on now with small children.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we definitely want to highlight is, how our society has changed. We talked about that at the beginning of this, of, people make connections now through social media, but when you really stop and think about it, are the connections that you have with virtual friends the same as having lunch with a close friend face to face? We don't get the same intimate, genuine relationships a lot of time through social media, but that's how people do life now, and it's different than it was, say, 30 years ago. When we look at some of the data on adverse childhood experiences, we see this shift. Whenever you're looking at our older adults, our over 65-year-old adults, they didn't grow up, or they don't characterize themselves as having these same exposures to adverse childhood experiences that we see now in the generations that have come after them. And I think that's something that's important that we look at. Right now, when we look at adults, we're seeing that ACEs are really very common. About 1 in 6 adults has had exposure to adverse childhood experiences. And really, whenever we look at those who have had a lot of exposure, that cumulative exposure, about 16% of adults have had exposure to 4 or more different types of adverse childhood experiences. Females and some racial and ethnic groups are more likely to have had repeated exposure or more exposure to adverse childhood experiences, and that translates into more health problems in some of those groups, and it's important that we recognize that in how we try to address some of the really evil problems that we deal with. Whenever we look at even COVID, dare I get up here and not say something about COVID, but when we look at how complicated it was for COVID, and we looked at some of the worst outcomes that we had with people who were obese, that had heart disease, or that were, in certain racial ethnic groups, we saw differences in how they fared with some of that. And I think it's important that we look at all of these different factors that play into our health. And, one of the other things that we see now is that the main drivers of our health outcomes are really non-medical drivers. Medical care, access to care, the quality of care we receive has about a 20% impact on our health outcomes. It's the social determinants of health. How much education were we able to attain? How much money does that allow us to earn? How much support does that give us in our environment? All these social drivers of health or social determinants of health are what we really see are responsible for about 80% of our health outcomes. So it's really important that we get it right in our children, because we do not want to perpetuate these health issues and these health problems to future generations, because they're really difficult to deal with.
I remember, we have our recently retired sheriff, Hans Miller, in the audience tonight. I remember a conversation that we had about the fact that the jail is filled with people that were abused as children. And there's just a cycle that takes place. And so not only we talk about health expenses, but we have actual expenses. We spend a lot of money as a government, as from taxpayers, because we can't get a handle on some of these issues. And it will, in the long run, maybe cost us money up front. And I hate to talk about it sometimes, it's just dollars and cents, but you all know what I'm talking about. There are real dollars and cents involved, and it has to be addressed. So thank you all for what you had. Now, one last time before we close this part of it up and throw this back to Tondrea, does anybody have anything they wanted to ask or even to say? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I am interested if TASCO was developing a resource for public educators to teach ACEs in the classroom and make students more familiar with that, and also to empower them to self-report abuse and neglect.
That's a great question. So we are training people to train resiliency. Most of our trainers are part of TASCO, so anyone can contact us, and that's going to be on the last couple of slides, how to contact me to get a training in your agency. Joe Coffey from one place and Christina Malou from one place is going to be doing a huge training for the school systems I think next week, next Friday. So we are able to go out into the community and train wherever. What we do is when someone contacts me about a training, I send an email out to all of our trainers. Our trainers come together, who has time to go, because we all have our own jobs that's going on. We do not have any staff for TASCO. I just want to let everybody know that. So we do have our jobs, but we do want to go out to the community and educate, and we do a resiliency screening. So it does take about 2 hours to 2.5 hours. We have educators from one place, peers, the health department. We're going to be training someone at the hospital. So we are open to training. However, some agencies have to purchase the video on their own, and the video is costly. But if you have one of the other trainers who has the video, then we can train together, which helps. We also have a small grant through United Way, which helps us to buy little door prizes, I say. So for every 10 people that we train, we give away an item. One of them is the book that you were just talking about. And we have journals for kids, coloring books for kids, talking about emotions, learning how to write down what their feelings are, or rather it be an adult to do that. I think it's very worthwhile to give these items away for parents because it's opening up that line of communication for their kids. Or if it's a professional, it's opening up that line within their workplace. So if you're interested in learning more, you contact me. My contact information is going to be on the slide pretty soon. Okay? I apologize. I'm getting over laryngitis.
Continue to open the floor. That was a great point. Continue to open the floor for anybody who would like to speak or to say something or ask a question.
I'm Bill Lanier, Onslow County Schools. And listening to everyone, just about every aspect of the importance of reaching the community here has been mentioned. I've been sitting there and I'm going, what would be a great question to ask? And you've been answering all the necessary questions to address all of the issues. I appreciate the fact that we are connected through training and through service. One Place and Thompson are intricately connected as far as Head Start is concerned. And I have to approach it from a personal perspective. And my perspective doesn't necessarily match anyone else's perspective because you have your own. But one of the most important things that we have to do, especially when we're in positions that we are, is to get from behind where we sit and find out where to go, and then teach from there. Because I know, and you know, that it's like pulling hen's teeth to get someone to come to you. There's a stigma behind reporting one's self or one's family. There's a fear that you're going to start a cascade of events that will make you lose your child, your family breakup, and every other possible contingency. So it's really very important, and I thank you all for what you do, is to get out there wherever and as often as you can to spread the word so that people can trust you to the extent that they're not worried about losing anything but gaining everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Butter, can I
Thank you for
speak on
coming.
that too?
Yep.
What Mr. Lanier just said. Everybody does have their own story, and I'm sure Captain Foy and I are on the same page here. A lot of the children that we work with, we try to, as much as possible, build bonds with the parents and stuff. And a huge majority of the time, the parents will report to us that things have happened to them in the past, and a lot of times they've never told anyone, and then we will be the first ones that they tell. And then, of course, on top of working our case and providing resources as much as possible for our children, and we're taking them to the Child Advocacy Center and all that, we're asking our partners to provide resources for that parent, because a lot of time that's the first time that parent ever mentioned that they had something happen to them. And then it's, of course, they try their best to make sure that their children are safe and stuff like that. And a lot of times they've never even mentioned that stuff has happened to them in the past. And so we deal with that quite a bit.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us here tonight to listen. I'm Kiva Clark, and I was just listening to all the people that spoke, and I realized that you're really not speaking to the people that need to hear what you have to say, because the ones that have young children and whatnot and need the help, they are not here. And all the things that you have said, it sounds good. Sounds good to me, because I don't have any young children to be out here to worry about. But I worry about the other people that have children, and they need your assistance. They need our assistance. And most time, when we come before different agencies, it always boils down to money. And we always send people to represent us that hold our tax dollars in their hand, and they don't let it go as if all of it belonged to them. But I was under the impression that when we pay taxes, it's to help people, not to put it in the bank to say, oh, we got a surplus, we got $1 billion in reserve. For what? What do you have it for if it's not to help people? And that's what I need to say, that with all the departments, every one of them will tell you, we need more money to do this. And when parents go for assistance, they can't get it because we don't have the funds. We just don't have the funds. We want to help you. We want to do these things. We want to build this kind of complex. We can build a huge jail, but we can't build something for children to go to and enjoy a wholesome life. Thank you.
Can I say, so just so everyone knows, this is live on Facebook tonight. It is going to be on GTN. So we are hoping that this will reach multiple people out in our community, and I'm hoping that people will share it from their social media pages onto other. You know, that's just doing it the way we're supposed to do it. We're supposed to go out there and share. Share on your social media. Share on your agency Facebook pages. If you know a family member, ask them, have you seen this? Do you have questions? Go to one place. Go to the Women's Center. Go to DSS or the Health Department or peers or wherever it may be. We want them to come to us. We welcome the questions. I can't answer any of the other stuff, but I do want you guys to know that this will be ongoing on GTN all month in February. So I'm hoping it's going to reach a lot of people.
Chrissy, I believe, yeah.
I would like to add, I think you're absolutely right. You know, we don't have the audience of exactly who we want to reach, but we can all do something. There are things that each of us are uniquely positioned to do in our spheres of influence. And I think that when we think about what can the broadest sense of individuals in the community do, it's recognizing how hard it is to be a parent in this day and age, recognizing the challenges that young parents in our community face with not having grandmas and aunts that are potentially close by to help them with parenting issues, and being willing to be that support to our community is really important. We think about screening for these adverse childhood experiences in healthcare. As an employer, we can have policies that are friendly to parents that need to take time off for their children. So we all have a role and a way that we can try to influence how this information can be disseminated through the community.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, and I thank you for being here. As Mrs. Clark spoke, my name is Brian Jackson. I'm on City Council. And I couldn't help but look at Ms. Clark and think about my past. I was a latchkey kid in the neighborhood that Mrs. Clark was in, and Mrs. Pat is in. And we had community then. So even though my mother wasn't home, I had someone down the street that actually put her hands on me. Actually put her hands on me. And we had a sense of community that we took care of each other. Unfortunately, and like she said, we're not reaching the ones we really need to reach. But we will reach the ones that can reach the ones that need to reach the ones. But we got to have the will to do that. We have a lot of people in our community, and the military community and the civilian community used to really come together, and it made for a greater Jacksonville back then. And we have to get out of our silos, which I see the organizations are finally starting to do that in a lot of ways because they understand the synergy that's built when we do come together. I'm working with a reentry organization right now, and I look forward to even speaking with you more concerning that. But until we have a lot of retired military, a lot of folks like myself that came through here and said, I'll never come back to Jacksonville. And it happens. But we have to get involved. And I hold a seat, but it's the people's seat. I'm just a part of a greater whole. And people have to understand that they're not, they have a part in this. If we're going to make this community better, then we have to come together and just do that. So maybe we need to work on arming the people to understand that they have the power to make this a better community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is one thing, Mr. Jackson, that I think is so important to recognize is everyone up on this panel and the 25 organizations that are involved with TASCO are focused on doing what we can for the community and preventing abuse and neglect. But it truly is everyone that's sitting in the audience tonight, all of the Miss Clarks that are out there in our communities, and all of those other individuals on social media, in their churches, in community sports, that are truly the ones that have the power and the influence to make a difference in the lives of our children.
I think, one of the things that we have as one of our goals is to shift this from an individual responsibility to community solutions, and realizing that the only way that we really will ever get a handle on it is to kind of band together. And as a community, we can establish what the social norms are. And if we put as the goal for that, creating social norms that reduce violence and, create a safe and stable environment for young families, that's going to go a long way in getting us to where we need to be.
I think that's a great point, and I was thinking about some of the things that Bill Lanier had to say, and then the people that came after that. I think that there's not much hope in extinguishing the problem here, but what we need to do is light a fire and strike the match that lights the fire. and work on this problem with passion that it deserves, that it needs, because, I mean, nothing less than our future is at stake in trying to get this done. So I really appreciate everything that is said, and I think that's why this group is here. Decided that they wanted to come out front and get this information out there and get folks personally involved. And hopefully we can, as a community, listen, there is great hope for this. In the last 2 or 3 years, just being around one place and talking to some of these folks, I have seen a lot of things that have happened and are happening to better the situation. It's just that we can't stop and we can't lose our momentum. And with that, I'm done, and I will turn this over to Tondrea.
I'm going back to my handy dandy slideshow, guys. So if anybody wants to take pictures of this, please feel free to, but I will have Matt put stuff on our Facebook page. So we do want the public to become involved. We would like to reduce ACEs, and by doing that, go to PCEs, the Protective Childhood Experiences. And I also want to say, as a community, how many of you have ever been through a hurricane in Onslow County? That's a community ACE. So as a community, we have ACEs as well. So as long as we can start working to rebuild, how do we do resiliency? How do we utilize our coping skills? How do we utilize all of our resources? That's why TASCO is here. We also want to come out into the community, and we want to train resiliency screenings. We want to train darkness to light, which is the sexual abuse prevention training. We want to train protective factors. We also have the ability to come out and do community cafes, which is exactly what you guys are talking about. We can come out to a very specific community and bring everybody to the table. We could facilitate the meeting free of charge and have the community come up. What are our issues in our community, and how can we resolve those in our community? And then we can go back in a month or so and follow back up. What is happening in the community? What can we do to help support this? So we have options for working with everyone in Onslow County, so we would love to do that. Request any of the screenings or trainings that are available to you guys. You could contact me at Pierce. My number is right here, the 910-333-9725. Or you can send me an email. And my name is Tondrea. Promise y'all, I'm the only Tondrea in Onslow County. So if you call me, I'm here. I'm Tondrea. I'm going to be there for you. I've also put on here our Facebook information. We also have a web page as well, and you'll see that in just a moment. And we started some hashtags. So if you see our information on social media, it is going to be hashtag TASCO, hashtag prevention starts with us, and hashtag it's our village. Onslow County is every one of our village, and we all need to take it respectively and take a hold of it just like a big old hug. I love giving hugs, if anybody knows me. I'm there for you guys. All of our partners are there for you guys. We're there to talk with people. We're there to get them connected, because connections really does matter when it comes to this. I hope everybody's taking a picture of that, but we will share this on our Facebook page as well. How to make a CPS report. When I put this together, I didn't have Crime Stoppers number or anything of this nature, but we will also put that on our social media page as well for everyone. But the daytime number at DSS is the 219-1955. And nights and after hours, you could call the Sheriff's Department at 455-3113 and ask to speak to the duty social worker or the social worker on call. And they're going to call you back 24/7. You call the Sheriff's Department, you call the Police Department, you call Crime Stoppers. They're all going to work together when it comes to talking to each other and making reports. To include if it's on base. If something's happening on base and they need to report to DSS, or DSS needs to talk to base law enforcement, they're going to do that. I do want you guys to know that. Regardless if it's happening nights, weekends, 12 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock, there's someone on call. I promise you guys. I will put the tip line and everything that Julia gave me instead of trying to read these out to you, and we'll put that on social media for you guys tonight, okay? We do ask that also we are going to plan on doing town hall meetings quarterly here. Raquel painter from United Way will be scheduling those. We will place them on our social media. We will send them out through our TASCO members. They will put it on their agencies. If you see it, share it. Anything on our Facebook page, our websites, if you like it and you want to share with someone, please do share it with them. Again, there's our Facebook and our website. And I do want to also thank, we do have city employees, county employees, nonprofit employees, and we have participating parents that are working with TASCO. As you will see, these are all nonprofits that are coming to the table. They're not getting paid to be there. They want to be there. We want to make a difference in our community. We live in our community just like you do. So we're asking you guys to partner with us. Thank you, Elliot.
Well, thank the panel and thank the audience. And with that, let's go out and get something done.
Yes.